So today, we're going to take a change in subject just a little bit from what we did on Monday. But before we do, I wanted to circle back on a couple of things. You know how it is, after you spend some time doing that, you always take a moment to reflect upon your comments and the things that were said on Monday. And I just wanted to come back to all of you and say thank you so much for the opportunity. It's, as I said, it's such a humbling experience for me to come before you. I think in many ways I feel like the least qualified man in the room. And so the challenge and the opportunity to try and bring value to you and to help all of you in any way is a tremendous challenge. And I hope that everything I do is only in the glory of God and is helpful to all of you. And I certainly hope that nothing that I say or did on Monday or today comes across in any way as being prideful or boastful about my past or my experience or who I am. I realize that the only thing I have to boast about is Christ Jesus, and certainly that's what the message I want to have across, get across to all of you. I also know that many of the thoughts and ideas that I bring forward are things that I have learned from my time in the secular world, and I believe I said this on Monday, but I wanted to reiterate it, that the more and more times I do this, the more and more I realize that only the good things that I tell you can be found and supported in Scripture, supported in God's Word. So if there's anything that I say to you today or did say on Monday that you see in any way that is contrary to God's Word or contrary to Scripture, I would certainly appreciate it if you would call me out and let me know that and help me to learn as a Christian as well and help me to be a better Christian in all that I do. So understand that I'm doing the best I can here, and I'm as I told you, a 6-year-old Christian. Still have lots to learn, and certainly it's been a long walk from where I've been, but I certainly look forward to a long and beautiful walk going forward as well. So thank you very much for this opportunity. So if you remember, on Monday we spent the time talking about really leadership and some of the qualities and character and values, and I guess the way I wanted to try and position that is that it was a day for us to kind of think about what's inside you as a leader and the kind of person that you are. What I'd like to do today is get a little bit more academic, if you will, or get more focused on activities and things you can do as a leader to help lead and move an organization. In essence, to help you find ways to affect change. Oftentimes, one of the biggest challenges leaders have is the ability to affect change within an organization that is lasting change. Let's see how this does here. And at least in my experience over the years is that many organizations talk about change. They talk about they want to do things differently. They want to improve. They want to provide better service. They want to be more in touch with their constituents, their customers. They want to do all those things, and they can talk a big talk, but it's oftentimes they get stuck in the early stages of that, and they talk about it, but they never really get off of the starting blocks, and they never really get going. And the question for us to ask is why is that? Why is it that people get stuck when they try to launch into new programs and new initiatives? Any thoughts? Experience.
Change. No one likes, well, I should say no one. It's typical that people do not like change.
Yeah.
People just don't want to do the work.
Very important.
The parable of Jesus, where there's the different types of soil, and some of them sprung up immediately with joy because they've got all this excitement, but then once they see everything that goes into it, maybe they don't progress past that point.
It's a great point. Great point.
Thing I see is you don't have enough people to have the vision between me here and me as a retired man, or point A and point C of the business. They don't have any idea how to fill in point B.
Yeah. It's going against the grain. Once you start the change process, once the reality sinks in, you start, then the hindrances, obstacles, after 30 of us or certain age, we get set in our ways.
Yeah.
And change is hard.
Yeah.
Takes us out of comfort zone.
I think that sometimes, we set really high hopes, high goals and stuff, and it's not going as fast or as smooth as we were expecting, so we can kind of get depressed, and we're stuck in that, do we want to continue this stage?
Great point. Great point.
People in organizations and groups, the more people you have, the more agendas you have. And if everybody has a different agenda, they're not all on the same page, they're not pulling in the same direction.
Just ask the members of Congress, right?
Poor planning?
Yep.
Through different organizations, I've seen a lot of people afraid. Fear is a reason that people don't move forward. And in the later years of that, I've noticed and seen even in myself, fear of success.
Yep.
It's a huge one.
I think we missed a big one if you don't have a good leader.
Yeah. But a lot of those are very, very, very good. And there's one that I want to talk about today, and each of you kind of commented it in different ways. And I always call this the theory of elephants. And the theory of elephants in my mind is that it's human nature. We're all typically very aspirational people. We aspire to be better, to be bigger, to be bolder, to be stronger. Sometimes that aspiration actually gets ahead of us. And we get such a high expectation for getting to that point C, as you talk about, or that the magnitude of the change that we want to affect becomes so big, it becomes daunting. It becomes so intimidating for people to figure out how are we going to take on this elephant. And the rule of elephants is, how do you eat an elephant? You eat an elephant one bite at a time. So how can you as a leader help the organization break this big aspirational idea, this desire, this goal that we want to get to, this purpose? How can we break that down into manageable bite-sized pieces to keep momentum moving forward so that we don't have that sense of overwhelmed feeling of not knowing where to go next? So a key part of it is to try and break the job down into smaller pieces. Another point that affects all of us is that people will start programs, they'll have great emotion and great passion and great desire to do things. They'll launch it with great enthusiasm. We'll create banners and slogans and have meetings and discussions and those things. And then I think I talked about this a little bit on Monday, is that the next week the volume isn't quite as loud. The excitement just isn't quite as much there. The next week it's a little bit less, and the next week it's a little bit less. Oftentimes it goes back to the theory of elephants, because people don't see progress. They don't see change happening. So initiatives and programs start to die that painful, slow death, something I've often called the challenge of false starts and good intentions. Organizations have these great intentions to launch these programs, and they get off to a great start that almost becomes insincere, if you will, but it's just too much, and it tends to falter.
All that challenge of false starts.
False starts and good intentions. I believe a big part of why those programs fail is, you'll see this happen particularly a lot in nonprofit organizations like the church, that you'll have a few men who own the program. A few men designed it, a few men got together and came up with the idea. They spent a lot of passion and energy and effort to put the program together, but they never got the buy-in from everybody else. It never became a part of the stakeholders' character, the stakeholders' personality. The members of the congregation never bought into the idea. So you got to make sure throughout your steps of your process that you bring everybody along with you as you take bites at the elephant. You got to always make sure that people know where you are, they know why you're doing it, they understand the purpose, and very importantly, they understand their role in the program, so that they know that they have a responsibility to see its success as well. Very difficult to do. Oftentimes, particularly the larger the organization gets, and the more distant you become as a leader from the organization, the people within the organization, the harder it is for you to do as a leader. That's why you often see large congregations, large companies, large organizations of any kind start to struggle when they get to a certain size, because there gets to be a separation between the leadership and the stakeholders. As a leader, you got to make sure that you bring those stakeholders along with you on every step of the way in the process. So, the question is how? How do you do all that? I'm going to try and take about the next hour to go through each one of these with some amount of detail. And I would tell you this is, I'm going to, for lack of a better term, I'm going to call this Doug's list. This is practices that I've put in place in the past that have been effective and have worked for me. You will see endless numbers of textbooks and programs out there that are going to teach you different methodologies of leadership. And in my opinion, somewhat of a cynical opinion, is that they're all basically about the same. We just put different words on the same program. But it's all initiatives to try and bring people along, and to bring people along step by step by step as you take bites of the apple. Important as you think, as we start going through this list, try to keep the stakeholder in the top of your mind. Try and keep whatever your program is or initiative, you probably all have something in your mind that you're thinking about in your future, whether it's future evangelism, it's future leading of a congregation, it's future whatever role you may be. Think about that initiative and that program. Go back to what we talked about on Monday. Identify your stakeholders and make sure you understand and know what it is that they need. And keep them in the forefront of your mind as we go through each one of these steps. The first one is you got to agree on the values. You got to agree on whose values are you going to support and what are those values. It goes right back to what we talked about personally for you on Monday, right? Anybody work on their values? Anybody work out today?
Last night?
Come on, guys. Got to exercise. You'll be a happier man if you do. But go back to the things we talked about on Monday about how to establish your values and to think about those things that are the core of who you are as a person. Apply those same concepts to the organization. Build consensus among all of your stakeholders into the core of who you are and what are non-negotiable terms for your existence. Okay? And by the way, I need to back up one thing on the stakeholders I want to talk about. The times that I have found in the past when I've tried to affect change in organizations, the times that I have found to be most effective is when I make sure that when you have the team meetings and the program meetings to move things forward, that every different stakeholder is represented in those meetings. So in the corporate world, for example, I recall I was running a company in California. We made some major changes to the compensation systems for how we motivated salespeople to be successful. It was a major undertaking. We put together a task force or a team of people to do that. Members of the task force included not only just the salespeople and the sales management. We had customers in the room. We had customer service representatives in the room. We had the marketing department in the room. We had the human resources department in the room. We had every constituent, every stakeholder who had an opinion about how salespeople ought to be paid was in the room. And typically, I'll talk about this if we have time, hopefully later on. Typically, you want to handpick the people that you have in those meetings because you want to have people who can not only be an active participant in the meeting, but they can take the message back to the rest of the organization, right? Because typically you know who those people are, right? There's those people that they're not shy about sharing their opinion. The best way to lead their opinion and help them form the right opinion around what you're doing is make them a part of the program. Make them a part of the initiative. Don't forget them. Just bring them into your fold. When you get that group of the people together that represents all the stakeholders, the first thing you should do is sit down and talk about values. How great would it be if our Congress right now would get together and have this conversation about the values for this country and what we can all agree on as some fundamental core values and principles to help them get through this partisan bickering that's going on within Congress. How great would it be for them to do that? Same way with any organization. Every stakeholder is going to have different point of view and different level of interest. Oh, the sales guys are paid too much. Oh, the sales guys aren't paid enough. Oh, we need to give more money to the marketing department. Oh, we can't pay people that kind of money. We gotta manage a budget. Right? There's always those kind of different opinions that exist within the church. Oh, we ought to be spending more money and more time on local evangelism. No, we want to do more missions programs. No, we need to worry about the building and the infrastructure. No, we need to worry about our educational program. There's always a different opinion for every member of the constituency and the stakeholders that you have in the program. Let's get everybody together and let's agree on a set of values. Let's agree on a set of principles that we can all embrace and we can always all use as our guideline for what it is we want to accomplish. Then you have to get it. The second step is get that same group of people together and agree on what's our purpose. Where are we trying to get to? What is the long-term vision for where we want to go with this program? This is kind of, in my mind, this is kind of defining the elephant, if you will. You can get grand, you can get bold, you can get brave, you can do all those kind of things. Typically in an organization, I put up here 5 years, it's a longer-term kind of vision for where we're going to get to. It's a way of defining the optimum state. Have any of you by chance seen the vision statement the elders put together for Bear Valley? Have you even heard of it?
You shared with us last week.
Okay.
Monday.
Okay. There's the vision statement. It's actually hanging on the wall up in the lobby upstairs. It's a long vision statement. I mean, it's a very long and very lengthy vision. And the elders spent a lot of time on that program, putting on that initiative to put that vision statement together. My concern is that not enough members, not enough stakeholders participated in the development of that, and it's becoming it's being forgotten about. It's starting to wane, and it's starting to falter now. That membership, as it always does, membership changes, new people come in, changes occur. Membership is not thinking about the vision. To be honest with you, I'm not sure that the elders, we're going to talk a bit about the tyranny of the urgent, that the elders are as focused on the vision today as they were 2 years ago. It tends to falter off. And it goes back to you got to build consensus and passion around it as a group, and so you have. What works great is when if you're an elder, if you built that compassion, that passion from all of the different members of the congregation, you can't forget it because they're asking you about it all the time. They're challenging you to do more, to be better, to be a stronger leader because they believe in what it is you're trying to accomplish. When you're working with a group of believers, they will push you along as a leader as much as you will drag them along as follower. Then after you've established the values, which is your rules, the vision, which is really your purpose, then you got to start breaking the elephant down into bite-sized pieces. Then you got to say, what is our mission? What is it we want to accomplish in the short term? What is our real specific area of focus? And that's typically, I put up your 2 to 5 year time period, but it varies depending on what your program or initiative is. But it's the idea of, instead of taking the whole elephant, the whole initiative, that we're going to be this kind of a optimum state when we're all done, let's just take one area and let's excel. Let's exceed in one area and focus on that for right now. The other things we may not be perfect in, that's okay. Set those aside, we'll get to those in the future. But for right now, we're going to focus just in this area, just in these programs. The elders of Bear Valley chose to focus very heavily on education and to improve the quality of the education programs and the coordination of the education programs. And I think they've done a pretty good job. I think the education works that are being done here now are much better. There's still room for improvement. But that was what the elders chose to do, was to focus on education as their first and primary focus. you guys have any questions, you gotta stop me, so I don't get on too much of a roll here. So once you got your rules in place with values, once you've got your purpose defined, the big picture vision, and once you've got the short-term program identified where it is we're gonna focus on, you got those things in your head, and you got these stakeholders, and everybody's participating in it, then you get the group together. And then you say, let's be honest with ourselves. Let's be honest about who we are and where we are. And it's what's called the SWOT analysis, and it's always a lot of fun. It's a great brainstorming experience, and you get the right group of people together, and the momentum carries on so quickly, sometimes it's hard to keep up with the ideas that are being thrown out. Importantly, does everybody know how to run a brainstorming session? There's only one rule in brainstorming. No matter what anybody says, you don't debate it, it's never wrong. You just capture it. You just capture thoughts and ideas and feelings and opinions. You don't start to argue with somebody, you don't start to agree or disagree or debate the issue, you don't allow people to run down what we call bunny trails that, let's take some issue or problem and let's argue about it. You just get people to throw ideas and thoughts out on the table, and you capture every single one of them. It's important, obviously, to listen.
I was just, what would be an example of what you would consider a threat when you're brainstorming?
Okay, let's talk. I was going to take you through that. Let's go through those. So, let's take example with. I'm going to do my best to recall memory here. We went through this process. There were a couple of Bob and Wes. You may have been in the room when we did that brainstorming session on education some time ago. I'll use that as the example. You get together and you start talking about, okay, at Bear Valley, what are our strengths that we can leverage when we focus on education? Well, obviously, we have a lot of strengths. We have some very talented men who are very deep in God's Word. We have the unique ability to have some of the greatest minds in the world help to teach and help to lead the education program in this church. What are some of the weaknesses? Well, some of the weaknesses are we have a hard time getting new men to come in and participate. We have a real hard time getting the support and the participation for the K through 12 programs. We have a real hard time getting any kind of momentum and consistency in our programs. So you start identifying some of those weaknesses. Then you look for opportunities. And we talked about, there's different curriculums that are out there. There's different programs that we can take advantage of and leverage that other churches have found success with, that we can leverage those opportunities. A threat might be, it can be anything from, there's other things within the church right now that are distracting us, that people believe are more important. A threat might be that the overall culture within the church is distracted with other issues right now. It doesn't have the passion around education that we need to establish. So it's things that are think of it as threats as being things that may cause the program to derail, if that makes sense. Right? If you want to get that train headed down the track, and you can leverage your strengths and opportunities to get it headed down the track, you got to find ways to build those strengths and continue to support them. You got to find ways to take advantage of the opportunities. You got to find ways to improve the weaknesses, but you always got to keep a wary eye out for what are those things that might knock us off the track. What are the things that might completely throw us a curveball? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
This is a lot of fun, actually, when you get it together. Typically, you get walls and walls full of bullets, points of different things that people have captured in ideas. It's a lot of fun.
At the end of the quarter, we actually will do that in this class. One of the exercises we'll have towards the last week of school, or this quarter, is that the men in the class will establish a goal that they want to reach and a plan to reach that goal, and then we will actually go through step by step all this, because I think it's such a beneficial area for them to learn in helping congregations they'll be working with to develop those plans and goals to reach them. So I want them to have that experience. And so we take a full class period to be able to kind of go through that and give them the idea of how it works.
Then once you've got the wall filled with all these great ideas and these feelings and these concepts on strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, then you got to start getting down to the specific activities and the things that are being done or that are not being done within the church. And we always call that the start, stop, and continue. And the idea there is, for start, is first you list all the current activities that are going on within the church. So what's our programs today, for adult education? Well, we got 2 Sunday morning classes going on, we got a Wednesday evening class going on. We've got K through 12 programs going on, we got a junior high through high school program going on. And you start just listing out all those current activities, those things that are occurring. And the first thing you do is actually go through that list of activities and say, is there any of this stuff that we're doing that is not getting us any closer to our mission or our vision? If it's not moving us in the right direction, why are we doing it? And that's typically a problem with that. It's often called the sacred cow, right? The people have their pet projects. People have been, we've been doing it this way for years and years, and by golly, we're going to keep doing it this way. It's tough to get people to say, let's stop the sacred cow, but it's one of the best things you can do for the organization because it can release tremendous energy that can be applied somewhere else within the organization.
Would you suggest doing the SWOT analysis and then looking at those weaknesses as far as activities that you think you're going to stop? And then would you say, if there's something within the organization or within the church that's a weakness, do you automatically just say, okay, we're getting rid of it? Or do you say, is there any way we can strengthen this and make it different?
No, I see those as 2 completely different things. Because maybe Wes can comment on this, but maybe I'm off on my perception here. There was a belief here in Bear Valley that we had a great junior high and high school program. That we had strong leadership, that we had some good programs going on with the junior high and high school. And that was a strength. It was a strength. But it was on its own course. It was completely, they were doing within that program whatever they wanted to do. And there was no consistency or congruity with what was going on in the adult program or in the younger classrooms. And so there was an inconsistency there. So the belief was, hey, that's great that we have that strength. We don't want to necessarily destroy that strength, but we want to stop that program from having its own agenda. And we want to ask that group to join in and be participative so that we're all studying the book of Daniel at the same time, right? So that families could go home at the dinner table and they could have a conversation, and mom and dad were in the adult class learning about Daniel, the junior high and high school, they were learning about Daniel, the K through 12, the younger kids were learning about Daniel, and so everybody could have a commonality that they could take home and bring to the family together.
Okay, so stop doesn't necessarily mean getting rid of the program, it just means changing the course.
It means maybe finding the weakness and actually saying, you know what, we need to take that weakness and build it up. Stop is more of a case of, I don't know if I could think of an example with the education program, but it's more of, this is completely unrelated to anything that we're doing or anything we want to accomplish with our vision and mission. And it's actually taking resources away that we could better apply towards helping us achieve our mission or our vision. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And an example, I think I tried to use here, is the continue would be the idea of, let's take the great momentum that's going on in the junior high and high school classes, and let's continue that momentum, but let's just ask them to change the emphasis and the focus so that it's consistent with the rest of the congregation. Right? Does that make sense? And then, of course, the one that always happens is identifying new activities to start. And as a leader, this is where you have to be a little bit careful, because this is where, here's some new bites of the elephant that we can take. Here's some new things we could do. Wouldn't this be exciting if we did this, we did this, we did this, we did this? And you get momentum going, people get enthusiastic about it, and they start getting all these great and wonderful ideas, it's tremendous that they're doing that, but you got to manage expectations, right? You can't allow yourself to let that elephant grow and get too big, because you'll go right back to where we started here, which is the false starts with good intentions. The program becomes too big and we dilute ourselves. So pick one thing.
You're saying manage expectations.
Yeah, manage expectations and focus on small incremental steps and get the momentum going with those before you take on too many more. For example, with the Bear Valley, I can recall that when we were going through establishing the mission statement, the elders had a tremendous tremendously hard time getting to grips with, we're going to just focus on education here for the next couple of years. They didn't like that. They wanted to focus on missions, right? They wanted to focus on a lot of other things within the, community outreach. They wanted to focus on, the caring for the needy and all those and you only had a handful of elders, and they all had their pet program, and they weren't willing to say, I'm going to set my sacred cow aside so we can focus on education. It took a lot of time and effort to make that happen. But you have to do that within the organization, is make sure you pick one area of focus and just start a few things. Don't get carried away, because you'll set yourself up for failure. Make sense? Then, once you've identified this list of activities and you've built consensus among all your stakeholders that that's the activities and things that we want to do, then it comes time to assign owners. Key emphasis on the word assign. As a leader, particularly in a nonprofit organization or in a church, it is forbidden for you to ever say, any volunteers? Don't ever allow yourself to say that. Because you know what happens?
No one volunteers.
You're either, one, not going to get any volunteers, nobody wants the job. Two, you're going to get somebody that's not qualified. Or three, you're going to get somebody who thinks he's qualified and thinks he's got all the answers that are going to solve this problem, and he's way off the mark from what you want. So it's forbidden for you as a leader to ever ask for volunteers. You know your people. You know your constituents. You know the people within your organization. You make the decision who's the right person for the job, and you personally go to them and solicit them to take the job. It's a very important role.
What happens when they say no? Find
You
somebody else?
go to number two. You always got to have your draft, right?
Well, I know that in education in our last church, it wasn't going to number 2, it was going to number 12 on the list. And I'm not exaggerating. It's like, we're desperate, and everybody is saying no.
We tried here, and we started, because we had that issue. And we tried.
that issue.
Yeah, I think we still do have that issue.
Yeah.
We tried it here, and I think we've kind of lost momentum on it. But we tried to come up with a program of, you had the primary deacons and the secondary deacons. So you had a team of people put together. So, for example, around education, we said, here's the 2 men that are the primary deacons to drive the educational program, but here's 2 or 3 other guys that we want to be part of their committee to help offload some of the work, to offload some of the pressure. It was a great idea and a great intention, but it takes a lot of effort to coordinate that and to get people to work together and move forward. And I think we've kind of lost that momentum here. But you're right, particularly in a church, it's really tough to get people to commit to the time and the effort. I believe, as a leader, the way and we're going to talk about that in just a minute, there's some things you can do to get people fired up to commit to the work. Because it's hard. I mean, particularly this day and age, people are stressed. People are carrying a lot of burden in their personal lives and their life outside of the church. People are very reluctant to sign up for more responsibility unless they can really see a reason for doing it, a passion for doing it. So we'll talk about that in a second. Very important for any leader in any organization is make sure that you put measurement systems in place to move the program forward. The old saying is, that which is measured gets done. That happens to me personally as well as to an organization. If you're not measuring your progress, you're not putting a barometer up on the wall or in your head that says we're making forward progress and we can see tangible changes and tangible results. If you're not doing those things to show those measurements, the program will start to falter because nobody's measuring, nobody's thinking about it, nobody's saying, hey, we're making forward progress. It gets forgotten about. The challenge oftentimes, and there's not enough time today to go into it, the challenge is oftentimes, what do we measure and how do we measure? It's difficult to measure some of the qualitative things, particularly, that are very subjective and very emotional, particularly in a church. But you try to do your best to try and put some parameters around it. If nothing else, it's just simply something to report on some progress and to remind people that we have this initiative going. Right? And so if nothing else, it might be just how many people attended Bible study on Sunday morning? How many people attended Bible study on Wednesday night? It's a quantitative measurement. It doesn't necessarily mean that that's the only answer, the only measurement that really is important. But it keeps the fact that we're focusing on education, that keeps that in the forefront of people's minds, that they're participating in growing the success of the church. Yes, sir.
Would qualitative be measured on basis of success as far as like more baptisms or greater amount of people coming to class, or how exactly would you measure?
Yeah, it's tough sometimes to put objective measurements around qualitative goals. You know, it can be just simply a level of, you can translate baptisms is one way, attendance to Bible study, attendance to Sunday worship, growth of the congregation. Those are all things. Spiritual, particularly spiritual growth within a church, it's hard to find ways to put a number around that, right? But you can feel it. You can feel it. And I think sometimes you just have to set the goal out there and say, you know, we want to try and see an improvement in the spiritual growth of our family. And you don't have to put a true measurement around it. But as I'll talk about in a minute, what you can do is when you see successes, particularly as a leader, you got to highlight them and spotlight them. You got to turn the light on them and say, look at this great success. We're so happy that this person has been able to do this and accomplish these things. Congratulations. And oh, by the way, anybody else who's interested in participating in this program, come see us after services. Right? So you can if there's an art to it, there's not a good science, unfortunately. But that measurement, establishing those measurement systems is a way for you to start building consensus in the organization around defining success. And that's why a lot of programs fail, is people don't see success. They don't see why am I going to go spend more time on this? And we're not making any difference, right? If they can see that they're making a difference somewhere, it starts to have an effect. Oftentimes, one of the biggest things that leaders forget to do is they forget to celebrate the success.
I'm sorry, did you talk about back to the top? Did I miss that somehow?
No, I just now flipped the page.
Oh.
There you go. Am I with you?
Sure, I'm good. I'll tag, I'm going.
Okay. If I need to back up anywhere, please just tell me to.
Nathan's a little bit older than you.
Yeah, my brain's old.
Okay, then what's fun is now once you've identified your initiatives and you've identified who the owners are, and you've agreed on ways to measure it, now you got to go all the way back to the top of the list and start over. But you do it with the individual owners. So Bear Valley Church of Christ did this program and decided that education was the area of focus. And they put owners over the area of education. Then those men who were the owners of the area of education went back to the top and started all over to take the area of education through the program and break that education elephant down to bite-sized pieces. Does that make sense? So now you go back and you say, what's the mission for education? Okay, we can't do everything to make all of a sudden we get the greatest education program in the world going in the church. Let's pick one or two initiatives that we can do within the church, bites at the education elephant, and let's just focus on those things. Let's do a self-assessment about those one or two things. Let's decide what we're going to start, stop, and continue. Who's going to own each one of these smaller things within education?
So when you go down and you make your way down through your list and over the course of time, and you go back up to the top, are you talking about that 3 to 5 years later you want to go back up and start doing that again?
No, I would say,
your mission?
in all honesty, that's a good point. The values, the vision, and the mission statement, those are pretty much those are fixed for the organization. So
Okay.
Education doesn't necessarily need to do a new values, vision, and mission statement.
So
They need to review what has been established for the larger organization. So review the values, vision, and mission and say, okay, this is what our leaders want us to do. Now, let's assess ourselves as education, and how are we doing against those values and visions and mission? And let's look at a self-assessment of just the education program. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so, yeah.
Yeah, you're not rewriting the top three.
You just wanted to make sure that you're doing what you had set out to do.
So it's not really back to the top, it's back to bullet. Review 1, 2, and 3 and start over at bullet 4. That makes sense. And then, as I said earlier, the key for a leader is make sure you find a way to celebrate every step of the way. Celebrate the success, because it's that celebration that keeps the momentum going. It's that celebration that gets more people willing to be involved because they see positive things happening, and it's human nature. You want to be involved in winners, right? So you got to celebrate. And if you don't celebrate, it gets forgotten.
I changed careers, went from the corporate world into education, and nobody had to tell me, but I think I learned from veteran teachers, good role model teachers. Early on, new teacher training was assess yourself, do a reflection on a regular basis. I don't want to wait a whole year and see, wow, that was the worst class. So I would randomly, just let it flow. It became a habit. Pick a student and say, hey, how was the class?
Yeah.
What do you like about it? What you don't like?
Yeah.
What are you learning?
Yeah.
That way I get feedback, and also do formal assessments
Yeah.
to see where the class is at, and also because you see same type of teaching, same lesson plans, same old, and kids are bored.
Oh, yeah.
And it's very unfair to them.
Yeah.
We're competing against cable.
Yeah.
The attention span is less, and so if the lesson is not interesting, it's not motivating or meaningful to them, then they tune you out.
Yeah.
But then also fresh eyes, somebody who's been there, for example, a church in a long time, and somebody who just moved from other churches.
Yeah.
You see things right away, stands out, especially if you've been in churches, large congregations, several hundred, 1,000, 2,000. You come and you see the smaller, it's noticeable right away.
Yeah, it absolutely is. One of the best ways to identify a strong leader is the strong leaders are willing to ask the question, how can I be better? The weak leaders are the ones who are saying, I'm the big man, I got the job, right? I'm the elder, you don't need to tell me how to do things, I'm an elder, right? A good elder comes and says, how can I be better? Give me your opinion. And they continually ask for feedback and ways to improve.
How do you celebrate, how do you measure, I guess, the success to celebrate something that's almost as ambiguous as an educational program?
Right.
I mean, what you're trying to do is, as a congregation, is we're going to move in this direction, and we're going to start having our classes set up to where the junior high and the senior high, as well as the adult classes, are all on the same course. And how do you, as a congregation or as an eldership, how would they come back and say, we've had this victory, and in what way would you measure that to be able to celebrate it, to try to encourage more teachers to want to be involved in it?
It's so, depending on the program, you have to make those decisions. It's the informal recognition, I believe, oftentimes does more than the formal recognition. So having a formal measurement system in place and pronouncing success against the formal measurement or something like that, people, oh, that's interesting, that's nice. But when an elder walks up to you and says, Bob, you did a great job teaching class today, thank you so very much. And when you're doing that, Wes is standing right next to you, and here's the elder saying, thank you so much, Bob, you did a great job. What happens to Wes? He's motivated to go teach.
Sure.
You say, I want that recognition. I want to be that guy, right? So you find ways to. Certainly, there may be appropriate times when the elder stands up in front of the congregation and says, I want to thank Bob Turner for doing such a great job on this and this and this. And I think those things are important. And there's that fine line between prideful praise and appreciation, right? But a good leader finds ways to set out success celebrated and rewarded in a public, or let me call it semi-public way, where a few men hear comments. So that those guys are over here and they're like, oh, so Bob did a good job there, I want to do that. I want to be a part of it. Right? Yes, sir.
I believe also in a circumstance like that, Bob, that when you have your brainstorming, you can ask that question and get an awful lot of ideas you've never thought of to celebrate when you have people in the room. The other thing you can do too is you can ask people to write them down so that they're somewhat private. I may have a good way that I think, appeals to me, but it may be a little personal, and I may not want to share that, but I'll write it down, and I'll get it into the leader, and the leader will go, okay, I'll file that away. He likes to be patted on the back, only he didn't want to do it for public sake, or whatever the answer is. So that's another way to sort of maybe get some ideas as to how to celebrate.
A good example that I've noticed recently here, I think this is true, because I've just now started to have our grandson come to some of the Sunday school classes. It's the same ladies. There's a handful of ladies here that they're the ones that are always taking care of the elementary classes, right? And they get no appreciation. Nobody knows they're doing it, except for the families that are taking their kids down there to see them, right? And those ladies, they could use some help, I'm sure. It would be great for them to have more ladies helping them and take some of the pressure off them, if nothing else, so that they can go participate in their own edification and development in the adult classes. The best way to get more ladies to help teach and to run elementary Bible school programs is to recognize the ones that are doing it. And other ladies will say, hey, I want to do that. Yes, sir.
That reminded me of something that back in my home congregation, one way that we would kind of celebrate in a way is the members would usually get together and, with somebody in charge of it, of course, would basically put on a dinner for the teachers, and they'd take care of them, and it'd just be like an appreciation dinner for all the teachers, and no matter what.
Yeah.
Just something like that.
Bear Valley's done some teacher appreciation dinners. It's a great idea. It's a great strategy. Okay, I'm actually going to repeat a lot of stuff we just talked about on this next slide. That's about how to get involved. And what we were just talking about is how can you make involvement a contagious thing? So you celebrate and recognize, and you appreciate people publicly. It becomes contagious. People want to catch it. People want to catch that recognition. It's just human nature. We want to be a part of a winning team. We want to wear our Broncos jerseys when the Broncos are winning, but we're not going to put them on when we're losing. Right? It's the same thing in the church. It's the same thing in any organization. I want to be part of a win. So make it contagious by celebrating, by recognizing those people who do. Mark, I always feel like I'm in the way. Another very different way is to identify and create a sense of urgency around the need. There's often been a term in business called managing through chaos. Right? It's really about this. It's about saying, we got a problem, guys. We're in trouble. We got a major issue here that we got to address. We've got to solve this problem together. We're all in this together. We've got to get on this thing now, and we've got to make this our most important priority because it's urgent. It is the most important thing for us to get this thing solved. And you create that sense of urgency around it, and people will all of a sudden identify and define a purpose. The elders really need some help in this area of the church. I want to get involved in that and help those men out. I love the church. I love these men. I want to make a difference. I want to help, and I can help in this area. So let me do that. But it's almost a plea of desperation. You've almost got to take it to the point of, as a leader, of saying, guys, if we don't fix this, I don't know what we're going to do. We've got to fix this. So it's the opposite. It's kind of the opposite of celebrating success and excitement. It's taking an area of the church that really needs something to be addressed and make it a huge problem. If we have time here, I'm going to talk about my spin selling technique, but it's basically in selling, one of the best ways you can be a successful salesman is to take a problem and make it bigger. And you make it bigger by helping people understand the implications of that problem. If we don't fix this today, just think of what's going to be like tomorrow. And it's going to get worse, and it's going to get worse. Okay? Yes, sir.
Can you just briefly explain the difference between asking for volunteers and publicly asking for help?
First off, I would say publicly asking for help here, what I'm saying is I'm not saying the forbidden rule. I'm not saying any volunteers. We got to fix it's not saying, hey, we got to fix the roof next week, any volunteers. It's not saying that. It's saying, folks, we got a problem here, we need to fix it. And we're going to be asking some of you within the congregation to help us out. But if anyone else wants to help those people, please step forward and we'll talk about that. But it's to build passion more than it is to get in people. Does that make sense? And again, you gotta, once somebody starts to solve those problems, show that appreciation publicly that we had a really big problem with the roof, and thank goodness that Dean and Troy jumped on top of it and they got it fixed. Dean and Troy, congratulations, thank you very much. We really appreciate your help. And Kevin's over here saying, hey, I want to be a part of it. I want to help with the next facility issue that comes along. This is one of the biggest things, particularly, and I actually learned this here more than anywhere else. Read this sentence carefully. The volunteers' needs are oftentimes greater than the beneficiaries' needs. So the success within your programs sometimes isn't predicated on, yes, you have the needy, for example, the needy who need help. People in our family need help, right? And they need support. And they are tremendously appreciative of the help and support that they get. And it's very effective and it's very beneficial. But the member who helped that person has needs too. Oftentimes their needs are just to be appreciated. Just to doesn't oftentimes have to be public, but it has the opportunity for you to pull that person aside and say, you know, you made a big difference in this person's life. Thank you very much. So does that make sense? The volunteers' needs are oftentimes bigger. They need the recognition and appreciation just as much as the beneficiary does who received the benefits. Once you learn that, you can be a very effective leader. Because you learn that, and you can learn that leadership is oftentimes more driven by your one-on-one interaction and support to individuals than it is about the eloquent speech you gave in the I have a dream speech that you give in front of the congregation. It's the little things that you do as a leader that make the big difference. Okay. Before I go on, I guess, is there any other questions you guys have on organizational leadership and the process and those things? Yes, sir.
Part of different organizations, and if you've been around the block many times, I think it doesn't take 5 years. Within a month, you can size the place up, and the leadership, especially coming from outside, and not trying to be judgmental, but it's evident.
Right.
It stands out. Everything filters from top, filters down. Many cases I've seen, and that has affected me quite in a great way, is surrounding themselves with yes people.
Right.
Why? It helps them keep their position. Yes men,
Yep.
And when you verbalize that way, it's not, everything stays the same. Whatever they decide, whatever he decides is yes men, yes to it, and so that's what gets done. And it may not be, many times it's not in the best interest of the whole organization.
Yep.
Say the right things, the right slogans, but
Yep.
it's not, and that's one after another. That's why it's stagnant.
in the corporate world, I would tell you, I watched the company I was a part of. I've often said that what killed our company was arrogance. Arrogance at the top, where all of a sudden the leaders of the organization started reading their own press clippings. They surrounded themselves with yes men, and they felt high and mighty, and I'm the biggest and the best and the baddest, and they stopped being a real person, and they stopped listening to the people in the organization. They stopped being open to self-criticism, and that's one of the fastest way to kill a leader, is for a leader to get arrogant. Arrogance is a terrible, terrible sin, and it's a terrible, terrible problem for many, many corporations. I see it happen all the time. Any other thoughts? I went through that a lot faster than I thought I would, in all honesty.
You got a lot left to cover.
I've got a few, I'm going to kind of change gears now and just talk, this is less organized, I guess. This is more just some random thoughts and opinions that I've had over the years that, again, you can take them for what they're worth, and maybe they'll be helpful for you, maybe. The first one is people, people, people. Obviously, when you're in a leadership role, it's all about people. And as a leader, you have to really become very attuned to people and understand people within your organization. And so I have some different thoughts and opinions about people that I'd like to share with you. First off, in every organization, particularly in nonprofit organizations, there's three kinds of people. Some people get a little offended by my definitions here, but bear with me. There's three kinds of people. There's disciples, there's apostles, and there's terrorists. There's probably a fourth kind of people, but they're not present. They left. Okay? Disciples are tremendous, wonderful people. And they're loving people, they're good Christian people, they're people who every Sunday, rain or shine, they're in their seat, in their pew. Don't you dare sit in their seat. Right? They're in their seat. And they come to church every Sunday, they come to Bible study every Wednesday. They're always there, and they're wonderful, loving people. But that's all they do. They come to church. They're not doers. And I have recently had a lot of conversations with my wife that she and I are sitting in a definition of disciples. It's a 50-minute drive home one way. So by the time we drive in Sunday, drive home, then drive back Sunday night, drive home, we're spending, close to 4 hours a day driving just for Sundays. It's been hard for us to come on Sunday evenings and Wednesday evenings. But in either case, we're not doing anything else within the church in terms of being active members of the church and supporting the church. And my wife says I've been beating her up about it, but we've been beating each other up about it quite a bit lately. You're either in or you're out, right? You got to make a decision.
Hey, Doug?
Yes, sir.
Why, I want to follow up on that. I know you've been a Christian for 6 years, and I'll take that into consideration, but why do you think that is, and how can we get more men with experience as leaders to help out in the church?
Well, don't you think, Wes, a lot of it is we all tend to compartmentalize our lives to a certain extent, and people make a conscious decision about how much time they can or they are willing to allocate to different compartments in their life. And particularly this day and age, I think, if I compare and contrast today to life in the 50s, for example, right? This day and age, men are working long, hard hours. There's no such thing as an 8-to-5 workday anymore. Everybody takes their laptop home. Everybody's got their iPhone on them. People are working much longer, harder hours than they ever did before. Just they can't get away from their jobs. So I think there's Satan is hard at work here. He's creating all kinds of distractions for people to think about and worry about everything else in life except for church, except for God. And how do we overcome that?
Yeah,
That's a hard one. That's probably I could spend a couple hours on that, just brainstorming how to overcome that as well, because I'm a victim of it. I find myself in a situation where I've got so many things going on in life, and I've got all these activities going on, and I got all these kids and all these grandkids and family that always are demanding attention and time, and I regret it, but sometimes God takes a back seat, and that's a terrible, terrible thing.
Well, not necessarily to put you on the spot, because I know lots of congregations with men who obviously are successful and could be what I would call more natural leaders than some other people. And yet I'm trying to find reasons or how to get them to be more upfront in the church. Is it an issue of priority, like you were alluding to? Is it, I'm just wondering if you had any thoughts on how we can get men like that more involved in leading the church.
I tell you, the conversations I've had with my wife lately kind of relate to that. Is we have to stop ourselves from having such a short-term perspective. If we have an eternal perspective about things and have an eternal view of what's important in life, our priorities would be different.
Amen.
So how can we, as the men who are leaders, and you as men who have tremendous influence over people, help people get their arms around and remember the eternity of their decisions and put their focus on eternity and not allow the tyranny of the urgent, I'll talk about here in a minute, to take over. It's hard.
I think it'd be worth, obviously we don't have the time in this class to do it, but I think it would be worth our time at some point soon that we get some men together to sit down and discuss how we can do that. Because I believe that when you look at the idea of, and I'll use the term giftedness, there are some people who have natural abilities, there's some who have acquired skills, and there are others who have God-given spiritual gifts. Not miraculously, obviously, but I mean, they're just things that God has endowed people with certain abilities to do. And we need to find ways that we can use those individuals who have those abilities within the church the way God designed the church to function as a body, where there are those who have certain abilities to do certain areas. And to really find ways that we can as a church, and certainly helping the elders, find ways that we can incorporate those individuals. And I believe there are both men and women that fall into that, obviously with women in a different role, but obviously from the standpoint of the men that need to be involved, how we can work to incorporate them in fulfilling those abilities that God has given them, so that they can help the church really become what it needs to be.
What we're talking about is a true test of leadership. It's a true test of leaders being able to do that. Kind of take it back to part of that discussion can be it's another elephant, right? A lot of times the reason why men don't get involved is because it's a huge elephant, right? You sign up for owning a ministry within Bear Valley Church of Christ, it's a full-time job. That's not fair. That's not fair to the man who signs up for that to do that.
Right.
So how could we, as a leadership, how could the leadership of this church break that elephant down into smaller pieces like we just talked about to get something that only takes a few hours of a man's time rather than a full-time job. It's not easy to do. Yes, sir.
I mean, to me, the biggest problem in the church, in my opinion, regarding what we're talking about, is just that we've all heard that statistic that 20% of the people or whatever do the work. And so the people who are doing the work, they're burdened and can't take anything else on. And those who aren't, they just don't have any. The priority is not the work of the church.
Yeah.
I mean, what do you do about it? I don't know. I mean, but it's been in every church I've ever been in my whole life.
I think it's been a problem since time and eternity. It's just always been an issue. And that's really the difference between disciples and apostles.
Absolutely.
Right? You have apostles, the 20% are the apostles, the people who are, they're not only followers and lovers and believers, but they're also carrying the burden.
Absolutely.
Right? And how can we get more apostles, and how can we turn a disciple into an apostle is a huge, huge question. It's hard.
Well, sorry, I'm totally running with what you said. Going back to what we were talking about on Monday, the disciples that became Christ's apostles, he chose them, and they went with him, and they spent time with him, and it's kind of almost like the whole mentor-mentee kind of approach, mentality to it.
Yeah.
You have a lot of disciples in the church. The apostles might need to become more mentors to those disciples. I don't know.
Okay. But, by the way, it's a good point. Jesus didn't say any volunteers.
No, he chose
The apostles, right?
He chose them.
He chose them. Then the third category is a group of people that you, as a leader, must find a way to love dearly. It's the old saying, keep your friends close and your enemies closer. Every organization has them. Every organization has that person who they may have the best intentions in their heart, and they may have all the right reasons in their head for why they're doing what they're doing, but they're a thorn in your side, and they're looking for every reason to be critical of what's going on within the church. They're critical of what you say or what you do. They're people who always have an opinion and make life difficult for you at times. The best thing you can do as a leader is not to ignore them. The worst thing you can do is ignore those people. The best thing you can do is wrap your arms around them, love them hard, meet with them as many times as you need to one-on-one and say, you know what, Bob, I appreciate you so very much, and I always want to hear what you have to say, but can we keep it between you and I? Can we not have this discussion in a public forum, because it's not healthy for anyone else? And you find opportunities and ways for you to develop a friendship and a relationship with your terrorists. Don't ignore them. Because if you ignore them, you're just fueling their fire. Sometimes it's tough. It's hard to be friends with them. I've had some employees in my past who, and the last thing I wanted to do was be their friend, but I found that it was the most successful thing I could do, was bring them close. Everybody know who Peter Drucker is? Peter Drucker was one of the big management gurus back in the day. I always like this, that management is doing things right.
John Peters?
Leadership is doing the right things. So it goes, kind of think about some of the other concepts we talked about on Monday and the other days is this is where the truck driving leader really plays an important role. Is you're looking far enough ahead to say, are we going in the right direction? Are we headed down the right road? Not necessarily are we navigating around the Volkswagen Beetle in front of us. Right? Which becomes, there's a fine line between becoming arrogant and distant from your organization and maintaining vision for the long term. Don't allow yourself to confuse the two. Does that make sense? Don't say, well, I got to sit back and think about the big picture and not get down and I'm never going to roll up my sleeves and get my hands dirty in the details of the organization. That shows bad leadership. But while you got your hands dirty and you're in the sink washing the dishes, you got to look around and make sure that somebody's tending to the oven and somebody's tending to the customers and so on and so forth. Along with that, though, that part of that fine balance is, as a leader, you got to make sure what I say here, stay out of the way. You can't meddle in people's business. You have to maintain that elevation above the work of the day and the view anyway, so that you're thinking about that, doing the right things. One of the most demoralizing things you can do as a leader is to take the work away from somebody just because you think you can do it better.
So this is kind of deal with micromanaging?
Yeah, exactly. Nothing is more demoralizing for anybody is if the leader says, you know what, I'll write that article, or I'll take that issue. Let me go work with it. You got to coach, you got to develop, you got to support, you got to edify that person and help them through whatever way you want to do, but never, ever take the work away from a deacon and do it yourself. If you want to give it to somebody else, that's a different decision. That's a decision that you come to that says, this deacon's not qualified to do the work, or doesn't have the time to do the work, or doesn't have the passion to do the work. I'm going to take it away from them and give it to somebody else, but don't ever take it away from them and do it yourself. And very importantly, as a leader, beware of the boomerang. The boomerang will cut you down to size. And the boomerang is where, I think I used this example on Monday, of you give a deacon an assignment and say, Deacon, I want you to go work on this program or the initiative. And then the next time you see the deacon, you say, well, how's it going? And he'll say, well, you know, wait a minute, I can't do my job here until you, Mr. Elder, you go speak with Rob, because you got to tell Rob that I'm doing this, and you got to make Rob work with me. What happened there is that deacon just took that monkey and put it right on you, the elder's back. Now the problem is yours, and now you, the elder, have to go deliver the message to Rob. You have to take the time and the energy to think about all those things. What you need, as an elder, need to do is say, you know, you're fully right. Rob, somebody needs to talk to Rob, but you're more qualified to talk to Rob than I am because you know the details of the situation. So you have my full support. Go talk to Rob. But don't ever allow somebody to throw the boomerang at you and give their work and put it back on your shoulders. Because you as an elder will burn yourself out like nobody's business. Right? Yes, sir.
I know that one particularly, corporate America. You do see a lot of people doing that, and I don't know if it's necessarily fear or laziness, but some people take pride in the ability to manipulate leadership into doing the job.
Absolutely.
And leaders that aren't prepared for it can easily fall into that trap. So
you're absolutely right. There's some people who just have a real skill and ability to do that. Who's next? If you are a youth minister within a church and you have aspirations for someday becoming the preacher and taking on that role, when the elders are sitting in their elder meetings and they're talking about that they want to bring in a new preacher, and they say to themselves, well, you know what, Mark would be a great preacher, but he's such a good youth minister. How in the world could we ever let him get away? The kids need him, right? So the best way for Mark to get promoted and get the opportunity to be the preacher within the church is to make sure that he's identified somebody that he has groomed and brought along as the assistant youth minister, maybe in an informal sense, whatever the case may be. So he can go to the elders and he can say, I want to be the preacher, and you're okay because I've trained Rob to be my youth minister, and Rob's ready. Right? So know your successor. It's in the corporate world, people are so afraid to do this. They're so afraid to do this because it feels like a threat to them. If I train someone to be my replacement, then I'm replaceable. And that puts me in a terrible situation. So people get insecure and they don't want to do it. But if you have confidence in your ability and you have the strength and the fortitude of your own person, you want to develop someone to replace you so that you're a candidate for the next opportunity.
Something I heard said one time was, the only way to be indispensable is to be dispensable as a leader.
The old saying in business too is, the weakest link is always the first one to break. And don't wait for it to break, fix it today. And what I'm talking about is you'll always have people within your organization that are weak links, that are not doing the job that you've asked them to do. They're not stepping up and taking on the responsibility, or they're not successful for whatever reason. Ignoring it, as a leader, ignoring it is a guarantee to your own demise. Because if you don't address that weak link, that area or that initiative or that program is going to fail. The failure of that program reflects back on you as a leader, as much as, if not more, than the individual who's doing the work. So it's hard, it's scary, it's tough, and it's oftentimes a very difficult thing to do, but sometimes you gotta make that decision. If you have a deacon who's got an area of work or responsibility, the deacon's responsible for community outreach, and it's just, not that he's a bad guy, not that he's not capable of doing it, but his compartmentalization I talked about earlier, he doesn't have the time and effort to put into it, and he's not doing, there's no forward progress. You gotta go talk to him. And you gotta say, buddy, if you don't wanna do it, if you don't have the time, I love you and I appreciate you, and there's other things that you can do to help in the church, but let's find somebody else to do this job and take them out of the job. Fix the weakest link before it breaks. This is one I always like to refer to this, Parenting with Love and Logic. This guy named Jim Fay. Has anybody read the book? If anybody's going to be a parent, read the book. Jim Fay actually lives up here in Evergreen, and what I found is it's a book about parenting, about raising kids, and choice and consequences and those kind of things, and consistency with those consequences. And it's a very well-written book for how to be a good parent. But the practices and principles for being a good parent very much apply to being a good leader. It's a great book to read for leadership as well. Think about that. Okay. Take a couple minutes to talk about communication, and what I would speak specifically about is interpersonal communication and your leadership style. Particularly for those of you who intend to be preachers or elders or in any kind of a leadership role within a congregation. The best leaders in the world don't say much. Remember, one of the leaders I commented on yesterday was the learning leader that always asks questions, asks questions, asks questions. The more you listen to your constituents, the more you listen to your stakeholders, and the less talking that you do, the better leader you will be. There's always the charismatic guys that you can't get them to stop talking, right? But people always see right through that, and they know that. So you got to find that balance between your communication and your leading the conversation versus letting other people do the talking. Listen, listen, listen. You listen with all your might, you will be heard. Okay. I don't know if I explained this or not. Before I was with First Data Corporation, I was with Xerox for about 3 years. Xerox, at the time, back in that day, was known for being one of the best sales training organizations in the world. They had great sales training programs and things. So bear with me here. I'm going to throw a few Xerox sales training things at you. But they all apply to life today, I think. There's things that have helped me throughout the years. A good thing for you to do is when you know you're going to go meet with someone or you're going to go have a conversation with anyone about anything, sales call, or if it's an issue or a relationship, before you go to that meeting, force yourself to sit down and write 3 specific open-ended questions that you can ask that person. Make sure that they're open-ended questions. They're not questions that people can answer with just a good yes or no, right? Tell me about this. I'd like to know more about this. Help me understand this. Those kind of open-ended questions, make sure you have at least 3 of them in your quiver so you can pull them out during the meeting whenever you need them. You may never use them, but that's okay. You got them in your quiver, and when that awkward moment comes and you got to get to the next step, you pull one of those questions out of your quiver, and you keep the momentum going. It forces you to do, one, it gives you the arrows in your quiver, but it also forces you to sit down and think about the person and think about your objectives for the meeting and what it is you want to accomplish before you go into it. So many times people go into meetings half-hearted without thinking through their objectives, what they want to accomplish, and what they're going to walk out of that meeting with, that's what causes most meetings to fail. So force yourself to write 3 questions before you meet with somebody. And by the way, that's a good example. That might be that you're going to go meet with your instructor or your boss or somebody else. Force yourself to sit down and think about writing 3 open-ended questions that you can always pull one of those out when you need it. And it'll force you to also think about what else you're going to try and accomplish in that meeting. Obviously, you've probably all heard this one before, is that when you're talking with someone, look them in the eye. But what I see happen more often than not, particularly, it kind of becomes a game for me sometimes on Sunday mornings after service. You go up and stand in the lobby, and just kind of stand back and watch people. It happens all the time. People will come up and say, "Good to see you. How you doing, brother?" And they're shaking your hand. "I'm so glad you're here today. I can't wait to and they could care less about you personally. They're looking away from you. They're looking at the next hand they can shake, right? When you're sincere, when you are a sincere leader and a sincere heart, you're looking that person in the eye and you're really caring about that individual. And you want to know how are they and what do they really feel. The old "how are you" question is such an insincere question, mostly because people really don't want to know. Right? If you look them in the eye and say, "I really do want to know, how are you?" that's a strong leader. Yes.
I had a very interesting experience on an airplane recently, traveling to Tanzania. And on the way from Atlanta to Amsterdam, I was sitting next to this lady, and as soon as I sat down, I asked her, "How are you?" And she said, I don't speak English very well. And she was German. And so during the course of the flight, I didn't speak to her for about an hour. And so I was sitting there reading a book that was in the dust of the Rabbi Jesus. And she noticed on the back of it that I kept watching out of the corner of my eye. She would be watching as I would turn the book this way to read this side of the page, and it would have this information about the Jews on the back of it. And out of the blue, she asked me the question. She says, "Why as Americans her English was much better than she said. She said, "Why as Americans do you always ask the question, 'How are you?' when you don't care?" And I said, "Well, that's a good question." I said, "Really, it's just it has become a way of being an informal greeting, like saying hello." And so anyway, we talked for a long time about it, and then she got into asking me questions about the Jewish thing, and then it dawned on me about the German connection and all this stuff that was going on in the conversation and why she was asking what she did. And as we got up in Amsterdam to get off the plane, I looked at her in the eye, just like you said, and I said, oh, the other thing she really didn't like is when people say it's nice to meet you. She said, "What does that mean? You don't even know the person. Why would you tell them it's nice to meet them?" And so it was kind of the same conversation, part of that same conversation. And so when we got up to leave, I looked at her and I said, "It really was nice to meet you." And she reached up and put her hand on my shoulder and she said, "It was nice to meet you also."
Yep.
And so it just really made me more aware of how much we do that, of asking the question, "How are you?" when it's just really, it's become so informally a way of us just acknowledging someone's existence and then moving on, without really expressing that we care.
And you as a leader, you go back to what we talked about on Monday, your actions are always being watched. And when you show insincerity like that, by shaking the hand and starting looking for the next person, that insincerity leaves a huge, huge message with your people. They'll read right through that faster than anything. Yes, sir.
This brought to mind, as a young Christian many years ago, and asked the leaders, as you meet them every day when you in service, "Brother, how are you?" I'm a young Christian, and every time they say, "Oh, I'm fired up, I'm doing great," I said, "Wow." And then months, years pass by, man, never have problems. And I'm a young Christian, I'm struggling with this, I'm struggling with that, I'm struggling with this. And I feel like, man, I must be down in the dumps.
Yeah,
Something's wrong, you know.
yeah,
But then later on, you find out as time progresses, and it's sad, you know, that they're taken out of leadership, they leave, this major happened, they work on their marriage, you know, the truth comes out, you know, and it's always, how can you be fired up, you know, on top of the world every day, you know? I mean, be real, you know, be yourself, be real.
people put their shield up, right?
Yeah,
They
it's
put their
like
shield up and
trying
stuff.
to impress somebody or.
But a good leader has, you know, I'm saying formal meetings has 3 questions, but a good leader, particularly in an eldership role, can dig through that shield and can peel back the layers of the onion, get some sincere conversation going, and show some love for their brother and really make a difference. Yes, sir.
There's a way that you can, how do I say this? So Chris comes up to me and says, "How are you doing?" There's a way to fix that. Really tell him.
Yeah.
Nathan comes up and asks me one morning, "How are you doing?" I told him, "I got a migraine, my neck is killing me, and my arthritis is driving me nuts." I don't think he's asked me since.
And that was all in the bathroom, too.
Yeah.
Men's
tell 'em.
bathroom. Women's bathroom, you were the wrong.
Honesty is sometimes, it takes people aback, doesn't it?
It's amazing.
Yeah.
I know you really care.
I'm going to say, talking about, always looking for the next hand. There's been a lot of instances, especially like with what we do, and even you probably see it in chapel all the time, is after somebody gets done speaking and then everybody's kind of, we're all on a time limit, we got to get down here, but everybody wants to say hi to the good job, brother, that kind of thing. And do you have like a method of articulating that sincerity, but still keeping it, like, I'm sorry, this guy wants to shake my hand too, and then I know it's kind of a situational thing, but I imagine you've done like presentations before and stuff, and people will come up to you afterwards, or do you just really just take the time? Is that just the key?
Yeah, you got to take the time, but are you saying you as the member of the audience, or you as the speaker?
You as the speaker, everybody that's looking for your hand, you're not necessarily seeking them out, then you've got, you know what I mean?
It kind of comes up, there is that period of time where it's kind of that everybody wants to show appreciation, and you just got to accept it as that. And you can't always have that interpersonal dialogue that goes along with those things. Okay, I have a pet peeve I want to tell everybody about. I'm an old sales guy, right? Pet peeve. I have a huge pet peeve about these things.
Yeah.
Good. My pet peeve is, where do you wear this? When you have a name tag, where do you put it? Never put it on your left side. Never, ever put your name tag here. That's a sin. You know why?
No.
Because when I go to shake Rob's hand, "Hi, my name's Doug McNary." How can he relate Doug McNary with anything? If I wear this name tag, high and right, the word is high and right. "Hi, my name's Doug McNary." See, Doug McNary. My name's Doug McNary. I'm Doug McNary. It's a good way for you to when you want to be known, when you go to meetings when there's name tags and you want people to remember you, give them every opportunity to remember you by wearing your name tag high and right. Now, there's events sometimes when you don't want to be known. That's fine. You can hide over here. I can remember going to trade shows, and you want to go over to the competitor's booth. I'd put my name tag back over here and go to the competitor's booth because they couldn't see that I was with the competition with my name tag.
Would you classify this as a salvation issue?
No, I don't know about that, but it's one of those that's always bugged me because people will wear these name tags. They'll put them on their chains down here and put them inside their coat, and they'll wear them over here. And if you're going to wear a name tag and you want people to know who you are, make sure you wear it high and right so people can remember who you are.
Unless you're left-handed.
Yeah, well.
But are they
In
left-handed?
those cases, you still shake right.
Yeah.
So, another very important way to show sincerity, and it goes beyond just being putting on a show here, so to speak, but it's another way to be sincere is take notes. particularly if you have a member who's got an issue. Don't just listen to their issue and say, I hear you, I'll get back to you. And that's one of the reasons why I carry this thing. I told you, I've had this thing for 20 years. I carry this because what it is I have note cards. In the note cards, I have my name and phone number at the top of it. And I have these note cards in here. And most every Sunday, I have this in my jacket pocket at church. Or anytime I go to a place where I'm going to be talking to people. Because inside here, I have my note cards, I have my business cards, I have my value statement, and I have a pin. So I'm able to, when somebody says, you know what, Doug, I got an issue, and I want to talk to you about this issue, I immediately, this was in my corporate life in particular, I would immediately get this out and say, I'm ready. What is it? I want to know your issue. And the sincerity that it shows that you wrote it down, that you took their issue and you made a note of it, whatever you do with that note after the fact is not as much of the point as you took the initiative to pay attention and to write down what it is that person was thinking about. And for me, it always helped me because my memory particularly, the older I get, my memory seems to fail me more and more, but it's a great way to force me to remember things. To remember to follow up with a person, to remember what the conversation was about, and those kind of things. But as important it is for me to remember it, it shows a tremendous amount of sincerity as you as a leader that you care enough about what the person has to say to write it down. Yes, sir.
The other thing, I mean, there's ways to get around it, but one of my pet peeves is this right here.
Is what?
Cell phone.
Cell phone. By taking out a physical piece of paper and a pen, that person can see that you're not texting, you're not interneting, you're on them.
Right. Because the communication can't go past that piece of paper, right?
Not to mention, nobody ever carries paper anymore.
I know. I'm a little old school.
I'm a fan
No,
of
I
like
mean,
Brandis.
it just the act in itself is noteworthy.
And you know what a lot of guys do is these note cards to get your name on them and stuff, it gets expensive. But just go get some recipe cards. Get yourself a pack of recipe cards at the grocery store and carry a couple of recipe cards in your shirt pocket. It's a great way to show your sincerity and to remember things.
Also, if you hear a good recipe, you're ready to roll.
Keep hitting the wrong button here.
Well,
Nathan has that effect on you.
Okay. And the last thing on communication, on one-on-one communication as a leader, always try and make sure, no matter how difficult the conversation is, try to make sure you end on positive. I end in the conversation and saying, I really appreciate you, brother, and thank you so much for bringing this to my attention. And I really love you, and I'll get back to you. And I want you to know how much I appreciate you. Just to say I appreciate you is tremendous, tremendous impact on people. People will say, okay, you know what, he heard me, he made note of it, he appreciates me for it, there's no animosity, we left on a positive note, and it's so important as a leader to make sure that you end every conversation. You know, I'm sorry, I gotta let you go today. You're no longer gonna be an employee of our company, but I want you to know I appreciate you. I mean, you gotta be careful if you come across insincere. You gotta be careful. You gotta balance it and make sure that your comments don't come across as being fake. But be able to say, you know, I thank you for your service, and I know this is a tough thing, and I'm sorry. It really goes a long way. Yes, sir.
One thing that is so hard to learn but easy to understand, especially from where I came in, the last organization I worked with, one of our leaders told us that if you want to come across as genuine, be genuine. And that sounds so easy, you're like, you hold up. But knowing this guy and how he lived his life, you never walked away thinking that he didn't mean anything that he said, because that's just how he always was.
Lead from your heart, genuine behavior is easy to do. Okay. By the way, you, Bob, I really appreciate having that behind you. I can always look at the clock.
Isn't that nice?
I can look at you.
Yeah, it makes a difference. So you know you have 17 minutes.
I always kind of, I keep this as kind of my laundry list of just other stuff that as time goes on, and I've got 15 more minutes, I can kind of take you through some other stuff. And again, take it for what it's worth. Spin selling. There was a guy back in the 1970s, when he started, his name was Neil Rackham. Neil was one of the sales trainers at Xerox Corporation, and he actually trademarked or patented, or whatever you call it, spin selling. And I've always thought, and I've always put this challenge out in these events, I've never had anybody take me up on it, but I've always thought if you could get a group of men together and talk about how you could apply spin selling to evangelism, it would be so much more effective when you go door knocking, when you do evangelistic activities, than what is being done today. Let me try and explain spin selling. And you know, there's books on this stuff, there's classes and courses on this stuff, and there's a long thing. I don't know if any of you guys have had sales experience and sales training. You probably had something similar to this, again, with different words and different terms. But spin selling basically goes back to be prepared with lots of questions and ask questions. So first off, ask situational questions. You know, what's going on in your life? You know, what are the challenges in your life? Are you a member of a church? Do you attend church on a regular basis? You know, have you studied the Bible? You kind of understand those things, and then out of those situational questions, you'll be able to identify and define a problem statement. So you have not had an opportunity to know God. You've not had an opportunity to Bible study. And then from there, once you identify, then you get the person to say, yes, I have a problem. I don't know the Scriptures. There you got it. Now you've got them saying, I don't know the Scriptures. Now you can start asking implication questions that imply and make that problem a bigger problem. Okay, it's a problem that I don't know the Scriptures, but do you understand that the Scriptures say so on and so on and so on and so forth? And you make that problem bigger? And do you understand that this is a discussion about eternity? Do you understand that this is where you're going? This is a big issue. The implication is if you don't know the Scriptures and you don't understand God's Word, the implications are huge. The implications are eternal implications for you. And you make them bigger. And then you once you get them to acknowledge, yeah, you're right. This is a big issue. It's eternal. This is a big issue. Then you bring them to the need payoff. If you'd like to study the Bible and address these things and learn these things, I would love to do that. I would love to meet with you and study the Bible. I would love to help you understand God's Word. And you got them hooked. Does that make sense? So it's, if you think about evangelism as being, in some ways, it's a sales process. You're trying to convince people to open their hearts to God. You got to be kind of a sales guy to do that. And this is a way to do it without going in with the canned kind of, let me tell you this, let me tell you this, let me tell you this, let me tell you this approach. It's more of asking questions with sincerity and love. You ask those questions to understand their situation, to understand where they are, to help them see the problem, to help them see the implications of that problem, and turn that into a benefit that they need to study the Bible, and you're the guy to help them do that. Does that make sense? I think it's a great idea.
Mm-hmm.
If anybody ever wants to get together and have a spin selling for evangelist session, I'd love to do that.
I do have a question for you on this. You know, Nathan and Chapel made the announcement about door knocking, and putting this in perspective with what he was saying, how do you establish credibility?
Like I said, I'd like to get together with some men and talk about it. I don't have all those answers.
We're going door knocking December 1st, by the way, so we'd love to have you.
Yeah.
But I mean, this would be great.
Your point is well taken, is how do you establish credibility, because you've got 30 seconds. right? When they open that door, you got 30 seconds to keep them from slamming that door in their face.
Because last quarter when we went door knocking, man, the very first question, it's like you had a bricklayer right in front of you.
Yeah, it's hard. Yeah, it's really hard.
I think the key, when you relate it back to sales too, is preparation, obviously, and there's a huge difference between relationship sales and transactional sales. And transactional sales are typically easier because they need something, and they already know they need something. When you're doing relationship sales, typically it's on something that's much more important, and it takes more time to decide on than 30 seconds. So how can you build trust in 30 seconds? You can't. But how can you show them that you care? You can. So you can try to bite off smaller pieces and accomplish small goals on your way to the big goal. Like you said with the other stuff.
Yeah, good point. Just figure out what are those small ways to break that brick wall down in front of you, and just take one brick away at a time. It's
build on what you have in common.
Yeah. Very good point. Yes.
Evangelism, I look at people, I mean, the reality is some are front burners, some are back burners. You know, not everybody is going to be a 3-day Paul conversion.
Right.
I mean, you know, that's the reality. And, you know, when you care, you invest the time. I never converted anybody off the street. I always converted a friend.
Yeah.
I got to know the person.
Yeah.
You know, I became a friend, and, you know, not just for a conversion, but genuinely.
Yeah.
And it takes time, it takes effort, it takes investment. And, you know, those are the type, when you convert your friend, they don't fall away. Very, you know, they stay, you know, they grow, they mature.
Conversion comes out of love, right?
I was just going to say, sometimes we hear this phrase in football, you can't win the game in the first quarter, you sure can lose the game. One thing that we can do, we obviously can't establish trust like we want without time, but we could lose it right away without sincerity. And I've met people for the first time, and I would say most of the time, my first impression is pretty on tact as to what kind of person they really are. So you work on that first impression. God tells us to be sowers of the seed. He doesn't tell us, you know, you have to do all this and plan this and manage this and all that. Be sowers of the seed. So if I'm going to sow the seed, I'm going to do it with sincerity and a love for God, because I'm His tool here on earth. If I think about that, and I need to be His tool with sincerity and love, whether I get 30 seconds or whether I get 3 hours.
Yeah. Yep, the first 30 seconds are important. Okay, I got another little off the subject, Doug pet peeve thing. Has anybody ever taken Dress for Success?
You're Tom James. Who did you?
What's that?
Yeah, Tom James, and a lot of them. It's basically, it's a program that teaches you that how you dress and how you look says a lot about who you are and the kind of messages that you portray. I'm only going to give you one example. My message to you is pay very close attention to how you dress. Your dress says a lot about the kind of person you are and the message you're sending to the recipient on the other side. I'm only going to give you one topic that I think would be important. When I was running Western Union, I had to go on the witness stand in front of a jury trial and be the expert witness on a number of issues. The legal team, it was some very high-priced, high-paid. Sidley Austin was the name of the law firm. We were paying them lots and lots of money to make sure that I was a well-prepped and well-prepared expert witness. They would not let me wear anything other than a light blue shirt on that witness stand. A light blue shirt like that.
You wear gray as well?
There had to be a gray or a blue suit and a light blue shirt. Light blue sends a message of trust. It's true. You know, there's been research done about it. Light blue sends a message of trust. White sends a message of power and authority. So if you're going to go trying to establish trust with someone in an evangelistic way, wearing a white shirt, although a lot of guys do it, it creates a bit of a standoff. If you wear a blue shirt, it's much warmer and much more well received.
So white, you said, gives the idea of power?
White gives you an idea of power and authority. IBM used to require their salespeople to wear a blue suit, white shirt, and a red tie. That's the power look.
Is that why your slides are blurred?
Yep.
I was gonna ask you that Monday and I didn't.
That's exactly why. That's why I wore a blue shirt on Monday, too.
Now you want us to know you're the man.
Yeah.
We've been already established that you're the man. We've beaten around the bush.
But no, there's a lot to it, and if you ever want to study to read it, but
It's interesting.
your dress and your attire can make a huge difference, and particularly when you're going to go stand in the pulpit, and you're going to be in that pulpit. People are judging your attire. You know? That's why wearing a suit and tie or a coat and tie to the worship service, in my opinion, shows respect to the Lord. You're there to worship the Lord, respect the Lord. You come dressed appropriately. It's just my opinion.
So what does black portray?
Scary. I do have some brown suits. Ronald Reagan brought back the brown suit. I wear brown suits once in a while, but I wouldn't wear a brown suit if I was going to speak. I wouldn't wear a brown suit in any time when I needed to take a leadership position. I've got lots of gray suits and lots of blue suits. This one goes without saying, the value of a good night's sleep. It's, as Christian men, you don't have this issue, I'm sure, but you don't want to do anything today that's going to cause you to stay awake tonight. Which my wife has always given me a hard time about. My head hits the pillow and I'm out. And there's nothing better than a good night's sleep. This one I love, particularly in church organizations. Do you guys know what the definition of a secret is?
It's a secret.
The definition of a secret, you can only tell one person at a time. What that translates into, as a leader, you need to know there are no such things as secrets.
I would always phrase it to the guys that work for me, everything you say is up for repeatability. I don't care how confident you think, how much confidence you believe you have with this person. Know for a fact, if you tell them, it's up for repeatability as soon as you leave the meeting, or the closed office, or whatever. If you don't want somebody repeating it, then don't say it.
There are no secrets. As a leader, that's really important for you to remember. We talked about this earlier, that which is measured gets done. If you want people to, if you want to move forward with programs or initiatives, make sure you have some kind of measurement system around it. And remember that no decision is the same as a decision. Your decision to not act on the weakest link in your organization and not do something, that's a decision. So, as a leader, don't think that you can just ignore problems and they'll go away. They won't go away because you're ignoring the problem can send a huge message to the rest of the organization as well. If you're tolerating, particularly, I remember dealing with this many times in the corporate world. If you have a problem employee and you're looking the other way and not addressing that employee, everybody in the organization sees that. Everybody says he's making a conscious decision to ignore that person, and we wonder why. So, inaction is a decision in itself. Good luck comes to those who work for it. Some of these I'm really glad I'm doing this because it's reminded me about some things I need to change in my life. You know, whether you call it good luck or you call it providence of God, it's not going to happen when you just sit back and wait for it to happen. You've got to go out and make it happen. So many people sit around and say, I'm waiting for God to tell me what to do with my life. People got to go out and make their life happen, and God, providence of God will be there. Last one is be a scout. How many Boy Scouts are in here? Any Eagle Scouts? No.
Dad, what were we?
You're a Weeble.
Girl Scouts. I made an awesome bird feeder out of pine cone and some peanut butter, thank you.
That's awesome.
And we sold cookies.
You were
I guess we were.
I was going to say, you were in the Girl Scouts.
Those were the Girl Scouts.
sometime.
Yeah.
Every time.
The idea about being prepared is the more you can prepare for any event in your role as a leader, the more time you put towards preparation before the event, the better the event will go. So if you have an important presentation to make, an important meeting with an individual, the more time you spend preparing, the better it's going to go. Success is made before the meeting ever starts. Take the time and be prepared. Don't blow it off and wait till the last minute to think about what you're going to do.
I know you got just a couple minutes. Could you touch on the tyranny of the urgent, just real quick with that?
I think I might still have it. I got a whole other slide here, Bob.
Okay. I was thinking I got several more areas from last year there.
There's a couple more sayings that I think I've used this one earlier, which is in business, if two men always agree, one of them is unnecessary. It goes back to your conversation about yes men. Don't allow yourself to be surrounded by yes men. Surround yourself with people who offset your weaknesses. They will make you stronger. So don't surround yourself with a bunch of people who look like you and walk like you and talk like you and do everything, and agree with everything you say. Surround yourself with diversity. Surround yourself with people who can truly offset your weaknesses. Tyranny of the urgent. If we go back to the conversations about why organizations and initiatives fail and why programs get started and then they fail and falter, many, many times it's because the leader allows the tyranny of the urgent to take over. I know we put education first, and I know we as the elders need to spend some time talking about this education program, but we got a carpet issue. We got a roofing issue. We got a budget issue. We got a missions program issue. We got to talk about these things first before we can get to what's important. Right? People allow tyranny of the urgent to take over, and they allow their priorities to get distracted, and therefore momentum doesn't occur. On the contrary, as a leader, you can use urgency as a tremendous tool. We talked about that earlier as well. If you have a program or initiative that needs help, create a sense of urgency around it and make it go. Circle of control, circle of influence, circle of concern. You guys, anybody read Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People? Spend your time worried about the things that you can control and what you can influence. Don't worry so much about things you can't control. Make sure you understand, because I'm guilty of this right now. With the elections and all of the stuff going on, I've spent way too much time reading and studying and talking about things that are out of my control. And I've distracted myself from taking care of the things that I can control. 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, that's, in my opinion, the only important thing that's in there. Goes back to consistency of purpose, what I said out earlier. Know your purpose, and know that everything you do communicates a purpose. Every action has purpose.